Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this next interview. Europe is ramping up defense spending at an unprecedented scale, but behind the push lies a growing struggle over who controls that effort, NATO or the European Union. With debates over strategic autonomy, industrial policy, and transatlantic ties intensifying amid Russia's war in Ukraine and uncertainty around U.S. commitments. Joining us today on TVP World to unpack this power struggle is Andréas Hatzidakis, co-director at OPEWI, Europe's War Institute, and expert on European defense strategy and security policy. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Hi.
So, do you think that this debate between the NATO and European Union taking defense responsibility is turning into some kind of a turf war, or is it more of a natural evolution of Europe taking more responsibility when it comes to its own defense?
I don't think there is really a dispute. I think, first of all, we need to distinguish two things. Who is leading NATO and what role the Europeans want to have in NATO. And secondly, what can we do as Europeans on the industry side, right? So now we have seen that the rearmament budgets are surging. Europeans have put more than 800 billion euros on the table through loans, investments, fundings. The idea is to see how we Europeans can invest more, invest better, but most importantly, how we can invest together. This is what is going to help Europeans go forward, right? And by making European defense stronger, we are also making NATO stronger.
But can Europe realistically achieve strategic autonomy without a weakening NATO, seeing that there are a lot of overlapping fields?
Well, yes, but not tomorrow. First of all, we have to understand what strategic autonomy means. It's not independence, right? We Europeans, we are not looking at severing ties or not relying at all on our partners, right? The objective for Europeans is to make sure that we diversify and that we are not over-relying on our partners. Why? Because what would happen if, for example, the US or other external EU powers would cut supply to European components or to components the Europeans need to build their material? Our operational capability would be then very crippled. So for us, what is important when we discuss about strategic autonomy, European strategic autonomy, is to make sure that we diversify our supply chain, that we build European, and that we buy also European. This does not mean that, and it's not realistic nor pragmatic to say that we're not going to buy American or from another external EU country. But we have to make sure that we are more balanced and that we support our own efforts to become more strategically autonomous. So yes to autonomy, not to independence. And let me say also this, because this is something that we often don't understand. Being strategically autonomous does not mean being independent from NATO. We need NATO. NATO is a military alliance. The EU is a political and economic union. These are not the same thing. So one needs the other and the other needs the first one.
Right, that distinction also draws me to the question, how much do you think the current tension is actually driven by politics and how much of that is more military necessity?
Look, as I see things, Europeans have done a lot in the past few years. If you look at NATO, we have, as Europeans, all countries have surpassed the 2% of GDP that was requested in 2014. Now we're heading to 5% GDP. So on paper, we are doing the job. We are investing. We are doing what needs to be done. Politically, we also have to hear what is happening. And what is happening is that for the past decade, the US are telling us that they are focusing somewhere else. right? Their strategic interests lie elsewhere in the Indo-Pacific. They've been saying that for the past 10 years. And Trump, especially since last year through the national security strategy, has said it more explicitly and has accelerated this shift in the strategic interests. So politically, we also Europeans have to not only hear what Trump is saying, but also be more involved in NATO and share the burden and understand that we have to be more present also where our interests lie. So in the southern flank, but also in Ukraine.
All right, now going back to what you mentioned earlier, there is this buying European commitment, or at least prioritizing it. But do you think that would also risk slowing down some more urgently needed rearmament?
The question is tricky because many European countries still buy American and also from South Korea and other countries. Buying European, or at least what we're trying to do at EU level, is make sure that our materials are what we are producing as an European industry is going to focus mostly on European raw materials, components, and make sure that we connect each other. So buying European does not mean that we're going to slow down on rearmament, right? It means that we are trying slowly, but surely. It's not going to happen overnight. We'll still need 5, 10, 15 years. But what we're trying to do is to make sure that what we are going to invest our money in is going to be there for a long, long time.
Okay. Now, with the uncertainty of U.S. over NATO and Europeans increasingly talking about taking back control, how do you see NATO as an alliance reshape itself in the near and far future?
If we are realistic, I think there are 3 roads to NATO. EU replacing NATO, which I don't think is something realistic nor pragmatic. As I said before, the EU is a political and economic union. We are not meant to become a military alliance. We are focusing on security, but not military. The second option, which I think is quite realistic, is having a European pillar within NATO. And this, I think, is a good solution because it allows Americans to stay in while it shifts a little bit more responsibility, funding-wise, but also operationally, onto European members. And I think this is quite important for us also to acknowledge that we need to be investing more and also be more present. And when we're looking at February 2026, a couple of months ago, the Joint Force Command of Naples was announced to be taken by Italy in the coming year or 2 years. This is a major step up. So this is the second option. And the third option is really Europe, EU taking over NATO within. So this means that the US would slowly get out of NATO and EU countries would take the lead. I don't think this is the most viable option, but this is something that we need to think of, because if we don't, the decision will be taken for us.
All right. We'll have to see how that shapes out. But in the meantime, thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you for tuning into this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.